My son handed me a $15,000 check and said that's more than enough for an old man like me. I'm Judge Ralph Wilson, and that was the biggest mistake of his life. Tommy thought he was stealing from some helpless retiree. What he didn't realize was that he just committed federal wire fraud against a man who spent 40 years putting people exactly like him behind bars. When I discovered he'd forged my signature and sold my $2.1 million house while I was grocery shopping, something cold settled in my chest. Not anger, something much worse. The same feeling I got when I sentenced predators who targeted the vulnerable. You see, my son made one fatal assumption. He looked at my modest lifestyle and saw weakness. He should have looked closer. Because the phone numbers in my contacts aren't for poker buddies or retirement home activities. They're for FBI agents, federal prosecutors, and judges who've been waiting their entire careers for a case this clean. I'd love to know where you're watching from, so please hit subscribe and drop your location in the comments. Let me tell you exactly how this unfolded. People see what they want to see. And what Tommy saw when he looked at his old man was failure. I live in a modest ranch house in suburban Denver. Built in 1978, 2,400 square feet, original wood paneling. I drive a 2018 Honda Civic with 67,000 miles on it. Silver. Nothing fancy. I shop at Walmart, clip coupons from the Sunday paper, and wear reading glasses I bought at the drugstore for $12.99. To Tommy, this meant I was poor. See, when I retired from the federal bench last year, I made a choice. I'd spent 4 decades in courtrooms watching what money and power did to people, how it corrupted them, made them think they were better than everyone else. So I decided to live simply, keep my feet on the ground. Remember where I came from. My federal pension is $8,200 a month. I have investments. I own this house outright. But I never flaunted it. Never needed to prove anything to anyone. Tommy saw the Honda Civic and assumed struggle. He saw the coupon clipping and assumed desperation. He saw his 73-year-old father eating dinner alone at the oak veneer kitchen table I'd had since 1985, and he saw opportunity. The disrespect started small. Text messages that went unanswered for days. Phone calls that lasted 30 seconds before he had to run to another meeting. Sorry, Dad, big deal closing. Talk later. But it escalated. 3 months ago he started suggesting I sell the house. Dad, you're rattling around in there like a pea in a can. Why don't you get something smaller, more manageable? I told him I was managing fine. 2 months ago, he brought paperwork, power of attorney documents. Just in case something happens, Dad, for emergencies. I should have known then. 40 years on the bench teaches you to read people. But this was my son, my own flesh and blood. So I signed the papers and filed them away in my brown leather briefcase from 1985. Last month the pressure got worse. He'd show up unannounced, walking through my house like he was conducting an inspection. Running his fingers along the wood paneling, shaking his head. This place is falling apart, Dad. The kitchen's from the Carter administration. The carpet's older than my BMW. His BMW. A 2023 X5 in Alpine White. $83,500. He made sure I knew the price. I'm in real estate, Dad. This is what I do. Trust me, you're sitting on a gold mine here, but the market won't wait forever. Values are peaking. We need to move now. We, like it was his decision to make. But the moment I knew things had gone too far was 2 weeks ago. I was at the grocery store using a coupon for paper towels when I overheard him on his phone in the next aisle. Yeah, the old man's finally coming around. He's scared, living alone in that big house. I think he's starting to realize he can't take care of himself anymore. He wasn't talking about me. He was talking about a business transaction. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and thought about the cases I'd handled over 4 decades. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, family members who saw aging relatives as walking ATM machines. I'd sent dozens of people to federal prison for exactly what my son was planning. But this was different. This was family. Or so I thought. Because what happened next proved that blood doesn't make you family. Respect does. And Tommy was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning. Mr. Wilson, this is Rebecca from Mountain View Title Company. I'm calling to confirm the closing details for your property at 4712 Maple Street. We show the sale completed yesterday for $2,100,000. I set down my coffee cup. Slowly. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? The closing on your home, sir. Everything went smoothly. The funds should be in your account by end of business today. My home, sold, without my knowledge. Ma'am, I never authorized any sale. Long pause. Sir, we have all the documentation right here. Power of attorney signed by you on February 28th, authorizing Thomas Wilson to act on your behalf. The deed transfer was executed yesterday, March 15th. Is there a problem? Yes, there was a problem. A federal problem. I hung up and walked to my briefcase, pulled out the power of attorney I'd signed. The one Tommy said was just for emergencies. I read every word. Limited power of attorney for medical decisions only. Nothing about real estate. Nothing about financial transactions. Someone had forged a second document. The doorbell rang 2 hours later. Tommy stood on my porch, BMW gleaming in the driveway, holding an envelope. "Hey, Dad, got some good news for you." He handed me the envelope. Inside was a check for $15,000 and a single sheet of paper. "What's this?" "Your share, Dad. Told you that house was worth more than you thought. $2.1 million. Not bad for a place you paid $30,000 for back in the day, right?" I stared at the check. $15,000 out of $2.1 million. My share? Well, yeah. I mean, let's be realistic here. You didn't put any work into this deal. I found the buyers, handled all the negotiations, did all the paperwork. Real estate commission alone was $126,000. Then there were closing costs, title insurance, attorney fees. Plus I had to bring the property up to market standards. New carpet, fresh paint, staging. That all came out of my pocket. He was lying. I'd walked through the house that morning. Nothing had been changed. Not one thing. "Tommy, I never authorized you to sell my house." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Dad, you signed the power of attorney. I have every legal right to act in your best interest. And trust me, this was in your best interest. You'll be much happier in a nice little apartment somewhere, closer to medical facilities, easier to manage." I looked at my son. Really looked at him. Designer suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Rolex Submariner on his wrist. Hair perfectly styled. This wasn't my boy anymore. This was a stranger wearing my son's face. "Show me the power of attorney you used?" "What?" "The document you filed with the title company. Show it to me." He shifted his weight. For just a second I saw something flicker in his eyes. Uncertainty. "Dad, you're being paranoid. Everything's legal. Everything's legitimate. You should be thanking me. $15,000 is more money than you've seen in years. More money than I'd seen in years." This from a man who'd never asked about my finances. Never wondered how I afforded the house payments before I paid it off. Never questioned where my monthly income came from. I thought about my federal pension. $8,200 a month for the rest of my life. I thought about the investment account I'd built over 40 years of government service. 6 figures sitting in treasury bonds and blue chip stocks. But mostly, I thought about the cases. United States versus Morrison. Elder abuse and wire fraud. 18 months federal prison. United States versus Chen. Financial exploitation of a family member. 24 months federal prison. Tommy was looking at me like I was simple, like I was some confused old man who should be grateful for his generosity. "Tommy, let me ask you something. Do you know what wire fraud is?" "What?" "Wire fraud. Wire. Federal crime. Title 18, Section 1343 of the United States Code. Using electronic communications to obtain property through false pretenses." His smile faltered. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about forged power of attorney documents. I'm talking about fraudulent real estate transactions. I'm talking about federal crimes." He laughed again, but it sounded forced now. "Dad, you're being ridiculous. This is a legitimate business transaction. I'm trying to help you here." I stood up from my kitchen table, walked to the window, looked out at his BMW. "Tommy, in 40 years on the federal bench, I've seen this exact scenario dozens of times. Family member exploits elderly relative, forges documents, steals property. You know how those cases always end?" He didn't answer. "Federal prison." Tommy's face went red. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm educating you." "Dad, you're losing it. This is completely legal. I have power of attorney." "Show me the document." "I don't have to show you anything." "Yes, you do." We stared at each other across my kitchen, father and son. But the respect that should have been there, the love that should have bridged any gap, was gone. In its place was something I'd seen too many times in my courtroom. The look of a criminal who thought he was smarter than the system. Tommy pulled out his phone, started scrolling. "Fine. You want to see paperwork? Here." He showed me a photo of a power of attorney document, my signature at the bottom. But this wasn't the limited medical power of attorney I'd signed. This was a general power of attorney, unlimited authority over all my financial affairs. That's not what I signed. Dad, your memory isn't what it used to be. My memory is fine. I signed a limited power of attorney for medical decisions only. This document is a forgery. Prove it. The words hung in the air between us. Prove it. Like he was daring me. Like he thought his old man was too weak, too confused, too powerless to fight back. Tommy, do you know what I did for a living? You were a judge. What kind of judge? He shrugged. I don't know. Small claims court or something. Small claims court. 40 years on the federal bench, and my own son thought I handled parking tickets and landlord disputes. Federal District Court, Tommy. United States District Court for the District of Colorado. Appointed by President Reagan in 1983. Confirmed by the Senate 96-0. I saw something change in his eyes. Not respect. Not yet. But awareness. Like he was seeing me for the first time. I've handled more wire fraud cases than you've closed real estate deals. I've sent people to federal prison for doing exactly what you just did. Exactly. Dad, you're overreacting. Am I? I walked to my briefcase, pulled out a file folder. Inside were newspaper clippings from cases I'd handled over the years. Headlines I'd saved not out of ego, but as reminders of the responsibility I'd carried. United States versus Patricia Morrison. Elder abuse and wire fraud. Defendant stole $400,000 from her grandmother using forged power of attorney. Sentenced her to 18 months federal prison. Tommy glanced at the clipping. That's different. How? She wasn't family. United States versus David Chen. Wire fraud and financial exploitation. Defendant sold his elderly father's house without authorization. Used forged documents to complete the transaction. 24 months federal prison. Tommy's face was pale now. Still different? Dad, I'm trying to help you. By stealing my house? By getting you the best possible price? With my permission? You gave me permission. Show me where. He pulled out his phone again. This time his hands were shaking slightly. Dad, I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. Because it's my house, Tommy. My property. My life. You're an old man living alone in a house that's too big for you. That's my choice to make. Not if you're not capable of making good decisions anymore. There it was. The real argument. Not that I'd agreed to sell. Not that it was in my best interest, but that I wasn't competent to make my own decisions. In federal court, this is what we called showing your hand too early. Tommy, are you saying I'm mentally incompetent? I'm saying you're not thinking clearly. Based on what evidence? Dad, you're being paranoid. You're accusing me of crimes. That's not normal behavior. Wanting to see the legal documents used to sell my house is paranoid? The way you're going about it, yeah. I sat back down at my kitchen table, folded my hands. When you've spent 4 decades managing courtrooms, you learn the power of silence. How to let the other person talk themselves into a corner. Tommy filled the silence exactly like I knew he would. Look, Dad, I know this is hard. Change is always hard, especially at your age. But this is for the best. Trust me. I do this for a living. I know what I'm doing. What you're doing is wire fraud. What I'm doing is taking care of my father. By forging legal documents. By using the authority you gave me. I gave you medical power of attorney only. Dad, you signed a general power of attorney. I have the document. Show me the original. What? Not a photo. The original document, with original signatures. Tommy's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and for a moment his mask slipped. I saw panic. I have to go. Client emergency. Tommy! He was already at the door. This conversation isn't over. He turned back. For a second I thought I saw my little boy. The kid who used to sit on my lap while I read bedtime stories. The teenager who called me for advice about college applications. But then his jaw set and the stranger was back. Dad, let me give you some advice. Take the $15,000. Be grateful. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Or what? Or nothing. Just don't make this harder than it has to be. He left. BMW engine roaring to life in my driveway. I sat alone in my kitchen holding a check for $15,000. Payment for a house worth $2.1 million. I thought about the cases again. All those defendants who thought they were too smart to get caught, too connected to face consequences, too family to be prosecuted. They were all wrong. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Judge Hayes? It's Bill Wilson. I need some advice. Patricia Hayes answered on the second ring. Bill, how's retirement treating you? It's been interesting, Pat. Patricia Hayes, Chief Judge of the United States District Court for the District of Colorado. We'd worked together for 15 years before I retired. She knew my reputation. She knew my work. Everything okay? You sound stressed. I've got a family situation, legal implications. I could use a neutral perspective. Of course. What's going on? I told her everything. The forged power of attorney, the unauthorized sale, Tommy's attitude, the $15,000 check sitting on my kitchen table. Long silence when I finished. Bill, you know what this sounds like, right? Wire fraud, elder abuse, federal jurisdiction. Exactly. Have you contacted the FBI? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Bill, I have to ask, are you sure about the documents? Are you sure you didn't sign a general power of attorney? That's why I trusted Pat. 40 years of friendship, and she still asked the hard questions. Made sure I wasn't confused, wasn't mistaken, wasn't seeing conspiracies where none existed. I'm sure. I have the original document I signed. Limited medical power of attorney only. What Tommy used was forged. Okay, then you need to file a complaint with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. This is federal wire fraud, plain and simple. Pat, he's my son. Bill, he's a criminal. Hard words. True words. Let me make some calls, she said. Susan Miller is heading up financial crimes now. Remember her? She prosecuted the Morrison case for you back in '06. I remembered. Agent Susan Miller, sharp as a razor. Relentless when she got her teeth into a case. I'll have her call you. Bill? Yeah? I'm sorry, I know this isn't easy. After I hung up, I walked around my house. Really looked at it. The wood paneling Tommy mocked. The kitchen, he said, was from the Carter administration. The carpet he called ancient. This was my home. The place where I'd raised my son after his mother died. Where I'd sat at the kitchen table grading law school applications for adjunct teaching positions. Where I'd written judicial opinions that became case law. The doorbell rang an hour later. My neighbor from across the street, Helen Martinez, 75 years old, retired teacher, widow. Bill, I saw some activity at your house yesterday. Moving trucks? Something like that. Are you selling? I could have lied. Could have said yes. Told her I was downsizing, moving to a retirement community. But Helen had been my neighbor for 20 years. She deserved the truth. My son sold it without my permission. Her face went white. What? Forged power of attorney documents. Classic elder abuse case. Oh, Bill, what are you going to do? What I've always done. Follow the law. She nodded. Helen understood. She'd seen enough in her teaching career to know that family didn't always mean loyalty, that blood didn't always mean protection. If you need anything, she said. Character references, witness testimony, whatever. Thank you. After she left, I thought about the network I'd built over 4 decades. Federal judges across the country, FBI agents I'd worked with on major cases, prosecutors who'd argued before my bench, defense attorneys who'd earned my respect through competent representation. Tommy thought I was powerless because I clipped coupons and drove a Honda Civic. He had no idea who he was dealing with. My phone rang at 6 p.m. Unknown number. Judge Wilson? This is Agent Susan Miller, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Judge Hayes asked me to call you. Agent Miller, I remember you from the Morrison case. Yes, sir. Outstanding work on that prosecution. Judge Hayes briefed me on your situation. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss filing a formal complaint. Of course. Sir, I have to ask, are you prepared for what this might mean? If we find evidence of federal crimes, we'll have to pursue prosecution, even against family members. I thought about Tommy's face when he handed me that check, the contempt in his voice when he called me an old man, the way he'd dismissed 40 years of federal service as small claims court. Agent Miller, justice doesn't care about family relationships. No, sir, it doesn't. What do you need from me? All original documents, bank records, timeline of events. Any recordings or written communications? Recordings. I thought about my phone. Most smartphones automatically backed up call logs to the cloud. Photos, texts, everything. I'll have everything ready. Judge Wilson, off the record? Yes. I've been working financial crimes for 12 years. Elder abuse cases are the worst. When it's family, it's always the worst. But you're not some confused elderly victim. You're a federal judge with 4 decades of experience. This case is going to be different. How so? Your son picked the wrong target. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and my briefcase. Started pulling out documents, federal pension records, investment statements, the original power of attorney I'd signed. Tommy thought he was dealing with a weak old man who'd be grateful for $15,000. He was about to learn the difference between a victim and a federal judge. The next morning, Agent Miller arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. Black SUV, federal plates, the works. She was exactly as I remembered from the Morrison case. Mid-40s, sharp suit, no-nonsense attitude. Judge Wilson, thank you for agreeing to meet. Agent Miller, please, come in. She set a briefcase on my kitchen table, pulled out recording equipment, legal pads, evidence bags. I've reviewed Judge Hayes' notes from your conversation. Before we proceed, I need to confirm a few details. Of course. You signed a limited power of attorney for medical decisions only on February 28th of this year? Correct. But your house was sold using a general power of attorney with unlimited financial authority. Correct. And you never signed such a document? Never. She opened an evidence bag. I'll need the original limited power of attorney for handwriting analysis. I handed her the document from my briefcase. She examined it carefully, then sealed it in the evidence bag. Judge Wilson, I need to ask about your mental state. Any memory issues, confusion, medication that might affect your recall? Standard questions. She had to ask them for the record. Agent Miller, I'm 73 years old. My mind is as sharp as it was when I was sentencing criminals in your cases. She smiled. Yes, sir, I believe that. But I have to ask for the record. I understand. Tell me about your son's business. What do you know about his real estate company? Wilson and Associates Luxury Properties, downtown Denver office, high-end residential sales. Any idea of his financial situation? He drives an $83,000 BMW, wears designer suits, lives in a penthouse downtown, but I don't know his actual income or debt situation. She made notes. Has he ever asked you for money before? Never directly, but he's been pressuring me to sell the house for months. Why? He claimed I couldn't take care of myself, said the house was too big for an old man. But you're managing fine. Perfectly fine. My phone buzzed. Text message from Tommy. Dad, hope you're feeling better today. Sometimes stress makes us say things we don't mean. Let's have lunch tomorrow and put this behind us. I showed the message to Agent Miller. She photographed it with her phone. Interesting timing, she said. How so? He's trying to normalize the situation, make it seem like yesterday was just a misunderstanding. The doorbell rang. Through the window I could see Helen Martinez on my porch. She was holding her phone. Excuse me, I told Agent Miller. I opened the door. Helen looked agitated. Bill, you need to see this. She showed me her phone. Instagram. Tommy's account. The post showed him standing in front of his BMW, champagne glass raised, big smile. The caption read, "Just closed the biggest deal of my career." Sometimes you have to make tough decisions for family, but it all worked out. Thanks, Dad. #real estate, #family first, #big deals, #Denver real estate, #success. The comments were worse. Way to take care of the old man. Smart move getting him out of that old house. Bet he's grateful you handled everything for him. Finally, someone with the guts to do what's best for aging parents. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not anger, not hurt. Something harder, more final. Agent Miller appeared beside me, looked at the phone. Judge Wilson, I need screenshots of this. While she worked, I read the post again. Thanks, Dad, like I'd agreed to this, like I was grateful, like this was some heartwarming story of a son caring for his elderly father. The timestamp showed the post was made 3 hours after he left my house yesterday, 3 hours after I'd accused him of wire fraud. He wasn't just stealing my house, he was stealing my narrative. Agent Miller, how public is this investigation going to be? Depends on what we find. But federal wire fraud cases are public record once charges are filed. I thought about Tommy's Instagram followers, his real estate clients, his business partners, all of them seeing this post, thinking he was a devoted son, helping his confused father. Judge Wilson, are you having second thoughts? No, I'm having clarity. My phone rang. Tommy. Agent Miller nodded. I answered on speaker. Hey, Dad. Got your message yesterday loud and clear. I know you're upset about the house situation, but I think once you calm down, you'll see I did the right thing. Tommy, I never sent you a message. Your whole angry rant about federal crimes and wire fraud. Look, I get it. Change is scary. But, Dad, you're not thinking clearly about this. Agent Miller was recording everything. I'm thinking very clearly. Are you? Because Helen Martinez called me this morning. Said there was an FBI car in your driveway. Dad, please tell me you didn't actually call the FBI over a family disagreement. Family disagreement. $2.1 million in stolen property was a family disagreement. I called them because you committed federal crimes. Dad, this is embarrassing. For both of us. I'm trying to run a business here. I have clients, investors, partners. When they hear that my own father called the FBI on me over a legitimate real estate transaction. Legitimate? Yes, legitimate. I have power of attorney. Everything I did was legal. Agent Miller held up a note. Keep him talking. Tommy, show me the original power of attorney document. I already showed you. A photo on your phone. I want to see the original. Dad, I don't have time for this paranoid nonsense. Then we have a problem. We already have a problem. You're making me look like a criminal to my business associates. There it was, his real concern. Not that he'd stolen my house, not that he'd betrayed my trust, but that it might hurt his reputation. Tommy, let me ask you something. How much is your business worth? What does that have to do with anything? How much? I don't know. Couple million in annual sales. And how much did you make off selling my house? Silence. Tommy? Dad, we've been through this. No, we haven't. How much commission did you make? Standard rate, 6%. 6% of $2,126,000. So you made more money selling my house than most people make in 2 years. Dad, that's how real estate works. And you gave me $15,000. Dad, please, can we discuss this in person without federal agents listening in? Agent Miller smiled. No, Tommy, we can't. I hung up. Agent Miller turned off her recorder. Judge Wilson, we have enough to open a formal investigation. What happens next? I file the complaint today. We'll get warrants for his financial records, phone records, business documents. If the evidence supports federal charges, we'll move to arrest. How long? 72 hours. I looked at Helen, still holding her phone with Tommy's Instagram post. My neighbor of 20 years, seeing her friend publicly humiliated by his own son. Agent Miller, there's one more thing. Yes? I want this investigation to be as public as the crime. Agent Miller's investigation moved faster than I expected. By Thursday afternoon, she called with an update. Judge Wilson, we have a problem. A good problem. What do you mean? Your son's real estate company is under investigation by 3 different agencies. IRS for tax fraud, State Licensing Board for ethics violations, and now us for wire fraud. Apparently you're not his first victim. I felt something shift inside me. Not surprise, recognition. This was how it always worked. Criminals never stopped at one crime. How many others? At least 6 elderly clients in the past 2 years. Same pattern, pressure to sell, questionable power of attorney documents, minimal payouts to the property owners. How much money? Total? Nearly $15 million in fraudulent transactions. $15 million. Tommy wasn't just stealing from me. He was running a criminal enterprise. Judge Wilson, we're moving to arrest tomorrow morning. I wanted to give you advance notice. I appreciate that. Sir, there's one more thing. The arrest will be public. Media attention is likely, given your background and the scope of the crimes. I understand. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen and thought about the boy I'd raised. The teenager who'd worked summers at the courthouse, filing papers and running errands. The young man who'd graduated from college with a business degree and dreams of success. Somewhere along the way, dreams had become schemes. Success had become exploitation. My son had become a criminal. The phone rang again. Judge Hayes. Bill, Susan Miller briefed me on the investigation. Are you okay? I'm fine, Pat. No, you're not. This is your son. This is justice. It can be both. I thought about that. Justice and heartbreak. Law and family. The oath I'd taken 40 years ago to uphold the Constitution and protect the innocent. Pat, how many cases did we handle together? Elder abuse, financial exploitation, family fraud. Dozens. Do you remember what I always said about family crimes? That they were the worst, because the victims trusted the perpetrators. And what did I always tell victims who didn't want to prosecute family members? That love without accountability isn't love. It's enabling. Tommy needed accountability 20 years ago. Maybe if I'd given it to him then, we wouldn't be here now. Friday morning, 6 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Dad? Tommy's voice was different. Scared. Quiet. Tommy. Dad, I need you to call off the FBI. I can't do that. Yes, you can. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you agreed to the sale. I didn't agree to the sale. Dad, please. They're going to arrest me. You committed federal crimes, Tommy. I'm your son. Yes, you are. Silence. Then, Dad, my business is ruined. My reputation is destroyed. My investors are pulling out. I'm going to lose everything. You should have thought about that before you forged my signature. Dad, I'm begging you. I closed my eyes. Heard the little boy who used to crawl into my lap when he had nightmares. The teenager who called me after his first heartbreak. The young man who hugged me at his college graduation and said I was his hero. Tommy, do you know what I regret most about raising you? What? I never taught you that actions have consequences. Dad, please. Every time you got in trouble, I fixed it. Every time you made a mistake, I covered for you. Every time you hurt someone, I made excuses. Dad, I thought I was protecting you. I was destroying you. Dad, they're going to put me in prison. Yes, they are. For how long? I thought about the federal sentencing guidelines. Wire fraud, elder abuse, criminal enterprise, multiple victims. 5 to 7 years if you plead guilty, 10 to 15 if you go to trial. He started crying then. Not the manipulative tears of a con man caught in the act. Real tears. The sound of a man finally understanding the gravity of his situation. Dad, I'm sorry. I know you are. I never meant for it to go this far. Yes, you did. You planned every step. You researched power of attorney laws. You found vulnerable victims. You built a system to exploit elderly people. That's not... I just needed money for the business. Tommy, you made over $2 million in the past 2 years from these fraudulent sales. This wasn't about need. This was about greed. Silence. Dad, what do? You call a lawyer, a good one, and you prepare to face the consequences of your choices. Will you visit me? The question hit me harder than I expected. Would I visit my son in federal prison? Would I sit across from him in a visiting room looking at him through reinforced glass? I don't know, Tommy. Dad, I love you. I love you too. That's why I can't save you from this. I hung up. An hour later, Agent Miller called. Judge Wilson, Thomas Wilson, was arrested at his office at 7:30 this morning. Federal charges include wire fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy, and running a criminal enterprise. Bail? Denied. Flight risk, given the scope of the crimes and his financial resources. When's arraignment? Monday morning. Federal Courthouse, Judge Patricia Hayes presiding. Pat would handle his arraignment. My son would stand before my closest colleague and answer for his crimes. Agent Miller, thank you. Sir, you should know. The arrest made news. Local media, some national coverage. Your background, your son's crimes, the irony of it all. I expected that. Sir, the coverage has been respectful. Focus on the crimes, not family drama. Your reputation in the legal community, it's protecting you. After she hung up, I turned on the local news. There it was, top story. Prominent Denver real estate broker Thomas Wilson was arrested this morning on federal fraud charges. Wilson is accused of stealing over $15 million from elderly clients, including his own father, retired federal judge Ralph Wilson. They showed footage of Tommy being led away in handcuffs, his BMW being towed from the courthouse parking lot, his real estate office with FBI evidence tape across the door. Then they showed a photo of me from my retirement ceremony, Judge Patricia Hayes speaking at the podium. Judge Wilson served this district with distinction for 40 years. His integrity and commitment to justice are beyond question. The reporter continued, The irony of this case is striking. Thomas Wilson allegedly committed federal crimes against the very man who spent 4 decades prosecuting similar crimes. My phone started ringing. Reporters wanting interviews, former colleagues offering support, old friends expressing shock and sympathy. I turned off the phone. Tommy was right about one thing. His reputation was destroyed. His business was ruined. His life as he knew it was over. But for the first time in years, I felt like I'd done my job as a father. Sometimes love looks like accountability. Sometimes justice starts at home. Monday morning arraignment, federal courthouse downtown. I hadn't been inside this building since my retirement ceremony 8 months ago. Security recognized me immediately. Judge Wilson, good to see you, sir. I nodded and walked through the metal detector, took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Courtroom where I'd presided for 15 years before moving to the larger ceremonial courtroom for my final decade. The hallway was packed. Media, court watchers, other victims of Tommy's schemes. I recognized Mrs. Patricia Coleman, 82 years old, who'd lost her family farm to Tommy's fraudulent real estate deal last year. She saw me and walked over. Judge Wilson? Mrs. Coleman! I wanted to thank you. If you hadn't come forward, we never would have known we could fight back. Mrs. Coleman, I'm sorry for what my son did to you. Your son made his own choices. You made yours. That takes courage. Agent Miller appeared beside me. Judge Wilson, the arraignment starts in 10 minutes. You're not required to be here. I know. It's going to be difficult. I've been in this courtroom 1,000 times. I know how it works. What I didn't know was how it would feel to be on this side of the bar, not on the bench dispensing justice, not at the prosecutor's table seeking justice, but in the gallery watching justice unfold for my own son. The bailiff called the court to order. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Hayes. Pat entered in her black robes, carrying herself with the dignity I remembered from our years working together. She looked directly at me for just a moment, a slight nod of acknowledgement. Please be seated. We're here for arraignment in the matter of United States versus Thomas Wilson, case number 24-CR-8891. Tommy entered through the defendant's door. Orange jail jumpsuit, handcuffs, hair uncombed, face unshaven. This wasn't the confident real estate mogul who'd handed me a $15,000 check 6 days ago. This was a scared man facing the reality of federal prison. His lawyer stood beside him, Jennifer Martinez from one of Denver's top criminal defense firms. Expensive. Tommy must have liquidated assets to afford her. Mr. Wilson, you're charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder abuse, operating a criminal enterprise, and multiple counts of wire fraud. How do you plead? Tommy's voice was barely audible. Not guilty, Your Honor. Miss Martinez, what's your position on bail? Your Honor, my client has strong ties to the community. He's a successful businessman with no prior criminal record. We request reasonable bail. Assistant U.S. Attorney David Park stood up. Your Honor, the defendant operated a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise targeting elderly victims. He's a flight risk with substantial financial resources. The government opposes any bail. Judge Hayes reviewed the file. Mr. Wilson, the charges against you are serious. The evidence presented by the government suggests a pattern of predatory behavior targeting vulnerable victims. The court finds you are a danger to the community and a flight risk. Bail is denied. Tommy's shoulders sagged. His lawyer whispered something to him, but he didn't respond. Mr. Wilson, do you understand the charges against you? Yes, Your Honor. Do you understand that if convicted, you face up to 20 years in federal prison? Yes, Your Honor. Trial is set for June 15th. Mr. Wilson, you'll remain in federal custody until trial. The bailiff approached to escort Tommy back to holding. As they walked past the gallery, Tommy looked directly at me. Not with anger, not with resentment, with something that looked like understanding. For just a moment, I saw my son. Not the criminal, not the fraud, the boy I'd raised, the young man I'd loved. Then he was gone. After court, Agent Miller walked with me to the parking garage. Judge Wilson, there's been a development. What kind of development? 3 more victims came forward after the arrest made news. Total fraud amount is now over $20 million. $20 million. Tommy had stolen $20 million from elderly people who trusted him. There's more. The IRS found evidence of tax evasion. State Licensing Board found evidence of kickback schemes with mortgage brokers. The U.S. Attorney is considering additional charges. How many more years? Could be life, if they charge him under RICO statutes. Life in prison. My son could die in federal custody. Judge Wilson, I need to ask. Any regrets about coming forward? I thought about Mrs. Coleman in the hallway, about the other victims who would never have known they had recourse without this case, about the elderly people Tommy might have victimized in the future if he hadn't been stopped. No regrets. Even knowing he might spend the rest of his life in prison? Agent Miller, in 40 years on the bench, what's the one thing I learned about justice? What's that, sir? It's not about punishment, it's about protection. We don't send criminals to prison to hurt them. We send them to prison to protect their potential victims. And your son? My son chose to prey on vulnerable people. Society deserves protection from my son. We reached my Honda Civic. Agent Miller smiled. Judge Wilson, can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you drive a Honda Civic? I mean, federal judges make good money. You could afford something nicer. Agent Miller, what's the most expensive car in my driveway worth? I don't know, $30,000? And what was my son's BMW worth? $83,000. Which one of us was stealing money from elderly people? She laughed. Point taken. I drove home through downtown Denver, past Tommy's real estate office, now empty with federal seizure notices on the windows, past his penthouse apartment building where U.S. Marshals had seized his assets, past the BMW dealership where he'd bought his car with stolen money. At home, I sat at my kitchen table with the mail, bills, pension check, letter from the title company asking about the fraudulent sale of my house. The house was mine again. Federal court had voided the sale immediately upon Tommy's arrest. The buyers were understanding. They'd been victims too, purchasing property through fraudulent means. But I wasn't the same man who'd lived here a week ago. Tommy had been right about one thing. I was alone in a house that felt too big, but not because I was weak or incapable, because I'd been living with the illusion of family. Real family doesn't steal from you. Real family doesn't exploit your trust. Real family doesn't treat you like a mark in a confidence game. I'd lost a son this week, but I'd found something else. Self-respect. The phone rang. Judge Hayes. Bill, how are you holding up? I'm fine, Pat. That was hard today, seeing him in custody. Yes, it was. Any second thoughts? None. Bill, you know this isn't your fault, right? I know. And you know you did the right thing? I know that too. Okay, just checking. After she hung up, I made myself dinner, sat at my kitchen table, looked around my house, my home. Tommy was in federal custody tonight, probably lying on a narrow bunk in a concrete cell, thinking about the choices that led him there. I was free, in my own home, having made the hardest choice of my life. But the right choice. Justice doesn't care about family relationships. Sometimes that's the most important lesson a father can teach his son. 3 months later, Jennifer Martinez called with a plea offer. Judge Wilson, I wanted to discuss this with you personally before my client makes his decision. I appreciate that, Miss Martinez, but I'm not the prosecutor. I'm just a victim. You're not just any victim, sir. Your opinion carries weight with the U.S. Attorney's Office. The plea offer was substantial. Tommy would plead guilty to conspiracy, wire fraud, and elder abuse. 15 years in federal prison, full restitution to all victims, forfeiture of all assets. What's your recommendation to your client? Take the deal. If this goes to trial, he's looking at life without parole under RICO statutes. Life without parole. My son would never leave federal prison. Miss Martinez, has Tommy expressed any remorse for his victims? He's expressed remorse for disappointing you. That's not what I asked. Long pause. No, sir. His remorse seems focused on his own situation rather than the harm he caused. That told me everything I needed to know. Tommy was sorry he got caught. He wasn't sorry he'd stolen $20 million from elderly people. Miss Martinez, I won't advocate for or against any particular sentence. That's between your client and the justice system. I understand. Judge Wilson, may I ask you something? Of course. Do you want to see your son before he's transferred to federal prison? The question I'd been avoiding for months. Did I want one final conversation with Tommy? One last chance to say goodbye to the boy I'd raised? I'll think about it. Tommy took the plea deal. 15 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole. He'd be 50 years old when he got out, if he got out. The sentencing hearing was packed. Media attention had grown as more victims came forward. Tommy's criminal enterprise had stretched across 3 states, targeting elderly people with assets worth stealing. U.S. Attorney David Park read the impact statements from victims. Mrs. Coleman, who'd lost her family farm. Robert Ralphs, who'd lost his retirement savings. Sarah Mitchell, who'd lost the home her late husband built with his own hands. 23 victims in total. Over $22 million stolen. When it was time for Tommy's statement, he stood slowly, looked directly at me in the gallery. Your Honor, I want to apologize to the victims of my crimes. I betrayed their trust. I stole their security. I caused pain that can't be measured in dollars. Good words, scripted by his lawyer, but good words. I also want to apologize to my father. Judge Ralph Wilson taught me right from wrong. He showed me what integrity looks like. I dishonored everything he tried to teach me. He paused, took a breath. But mostly I want to thank my father for doing what he taught me to do my whole life. The right thing, even when it's hard. Judge Hayes imposed the 15-year sentence. Tommy was led away in shackles. As he passed my row, he mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." After the hearing, Agent Miller found me in the hallway. Judge Wilson, what's next for you? I'm not sure. Have you thought about victim advocacy, speaking to elder groups about financial fraud? I hadn't thought about it, but maybe that was what I needed. A way to turn this experience into something useful. The Colorado Bar Association called, she continued. They want you to chair a committee on elder abuse prevention. I'll consider it. Judge Wilson, you saved a lot of people by coming forward. Tommy's operation would have continued for years if you hadn't stopped it. I drove home through Denver for the last time. Tomorrow, I was moving to a smaller place. A condominium downtown, closer to the courthouse and the law school where I'd accepted a part-time teaching position. The house was too big. Not because I was old or incapable, but because it held too many memories of a son who'd never really existed. The Tommy I'd raised was a fiction. The The real Tommy was the one who'd stolen from elderly people and felt no remorse. That night, I packed my federal pension awards, my judicial commendations, the photos from my swearing-in ceremony, the gavel from my final case. But I left behind the family photos, the pictures of Tommy's graduation, his real estate license ceremony, his business success celebrations. Those were pictures of a lie. At my new condo, I set up a small office, put my law books on the shelves, hung my judicial certificates on the wall. On my desk, I placed one photo, Justice herself, blindfolded, holding scales in one hand, a sword in the other. Justice doesn't care about family relationships. Sometimes that's the most important truth in the world. Tommy was serving his time. 23 victims were getting restitution. Elderly people across Colorado were safer because one criminal enterprise had been shut down. I'd lost a son, but I'd kept my integrity. In the end, that was what mattered. 2 years later, I got a letter from federal prison. Tommy's handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity won. Dad, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I understand why. I've had 2 years to think about what I did. Not just to you, but to all those people who trusted me. I stole more than money. I stole their sense of security, their faith in people, their peace of mind. I know now what I couldn't see then. I was a predator. I targeted vulnerable people, and I felt justified doing it. That's not normal. That's not okay. That's evil. Evil. Tommy had never used that word before, never applied it to himself. I'm getting counseling here, trying to understand how I became someone who could look at elderly people and see opportunities instead of human beings. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand what you tried to teach me my whole life. Actions have consequences, and sometimes the consequence is losing everything that matters. I heard about your work with the Elder Abuse Prevention Committee. I heard about your teaching at the law school. I'm proud of you, Dad. You took the worst thing I ever did and turned it into something that helps people. That's who you are. That's who you always were. I don't expect you to write back. I don't expect you to visit. I hurt you in ways that can't be fixed. But I wanted you to know that your son is learning to be the man you tried to raise. It just took federal prison to teach me what a loving father couldn't. I love you, Dad. Thank you for stopping me. I read the letter 3 times, then I filed it away in my desk drawer. Tommy would serve 13 more years. He'd be 51 when he got out. Maybe he'd learn something in prison. Maybe he'd become someone worthy of a second chance. But that wasn't my decision to make anymore. My phone rang. Mrs. Coleman. She called every few months now, usually with questions about financial security or news about other elder abuse cases. Judge Wilson, I wanted to thank you again. Mrs. Coleman, you don't need to keep thanking me. Yes, I do. You gave me my dignity back. You showed me that being old doesn't mean being powerless. That's what this had always been about. Not revenge, not punishment, but dignity, respect. The right to be treated as a human being instead of a target. Mrs. Coleman, you were never powerless. You just needed someone to show you where the power was. And you did that. After she hung up, I sat in my office and looked out at downtown Denver. Tommy was in federal prison. I was in my new life. We'd both learned something about consequences. The difference was I'd learned it in time to matter. If you've ever felt invisible because of your age, remember this. Quiet strength isn't weakness. It's wisdom waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And sometimes that moment changes everything.